In this episode, we're going to take a careful look at what organizations really mean when they say they want to manage risk, because the word risk is often used in a way that makes it sound like the goal is to remove danger completely. For brand new learners, it can be tempting to believe that strong governance means saying no to anything that might go wrong, especially when you hear scary stories about breaches, outages, fraud, and compliance penalties. Mature governance, however, does not treat risk as something you can delete from reality, because every meaningful business decision involves uncertainty and potential loss. Instead, governance aims to optimize risk, which means making informed trade-offs so the enterprise can pursue value while staying within boundaries leaders are willing to live with. That simple shift, from avoidance to optimization, changes how decisions are framed, how accountability works, and how success is measured over time. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at CGEIT.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful starting point is to define risk in plain language as the possibility that something will happen that affects objectives, usually in a negative way, and to notice that objectives are the anchor of the entire conversation. When you do not know the objective, risk becomes a vague feeling rather than a measurable concern, and vague feelings push people toward avoidance because avoidance feels safer. Once objectives are clear, risk becomes something you can discuss as an impact on those objectives, such as losing revenue, damaging trust, disrupting operations, or violating legal obligations. Risk optimization then becomes the practice of choosing actions that improve the balance between the value you want and the uncertainty you must accept to get it. That balance is different for every enterprise, which is why governance cannot rely on one-size-fits-all rules like always choose the safest option. A safer option might reduce one type of risk while increasing another, such as slowing delivery so much that the enterprise falls behind competitors and loses market position. Risk avoidance is an understandable instinct, particularly for people who are new and who associate risk with blame, but it has predictable downsides that governance must acknowledge. When an organization becomes avoidance-driven, it often treats any proposed change as guilty until proven innocent, which slows decision-making and encourages workarounds. Teams may avoid reporting problems because bad news can trigger shutdowns rather than constructive fixes, and that behavior ironically increases risk because hidden issues tend to grow. Avoidance can also lead to underinvestment in innovation, meaning the enterprise misses opportunities that could strengthen resilience, improve customer experience, or reduce long-term costs. In many environments, the biggest risk is not a single dramatic event, but the slow accumulation of technical debt, fragile processes, and outdated capabilities that become harder to maintain each year. Risk optimization recognizes that doing nothing is also a decision with consequences, and those consequences can be more damaging than the risks of carefully managed change. To optimize risk, you need the idea of trade-offs to feel normal rather than suspicious, because trade-offs are the core mechanics of real governance decisions. A trade-off is simply choosing one benefit over another or choosing one risk reduction approach over another because resources are limited and priorities compete. For example, moving faster can increase the chance of defects, while moving slower can increase the chance of missed opportunities or extended exposure to known weaknesses. Spending more on controls can reduce exposure but might divert funds from reliability improvements that customers notice daily. Choosing a centralized solution can improve consistency but might reduce flexibility for business units with unique needs. None of these choices is automatically correct in every situation, and that is why risk optimization depends on context, evidence, and explicit decision rights. When an enterprise can talk about trade-offs openly, it can make choices that are aligned to objectives instead of choices that are driven by fear. A key part of informed trade-offs is distinguishing between different kinds of risk, because not all risks behave the same way or require the same response. Some risks are operational, such as outages, performance failures, and process breakdowns that disrupt work. Some risks are information-related, such as confidentiality loss, integrity problems, and unauthorized access that damages trust or violates obligations. Some risks are strategic, such as being unable to compete because systems cannot support new products or because delivery is too slow. Some risks are compliance-related, such as penalties, litigation, and loss of license to operate. When everything is treated as the same kind of risk, organizations respond with generic controls that create friction without clearly reducing meaningful exposure. Risk optimization asks which type of risk is most relevant to the objective, which exposures drive that risk, and what control choices reduce exposure at a reasonable cost. That approach is more disciplined than simply adding more restrictions whenever something feels dangerous. Because this certification sits at the governance level, it is also important to understand the relationship between business decisions and information technology, IT decisions. Many of the most valuable business initiatives today are IT-enabled, which means technology choices shape speed, resilience, and trust, but the enterprise outcomes remain business outcomes. If risk is framed as an IT problem, the enterprise may push responsibility downward and miss the fact that risk appetite is a leadership choice, not an engineering preference. Conversely, if risk is framed as purely a business issue with no technical reality, leaders may set expectations that cannot be delivered, such as demanding perfect security with no impact on usability or cost. Risk optimization connects these worlds by making the trade-offs explicit and by ensuring that leaders understand what they are accepting and what they are gaining. When this alignment is strong, IT becomes a partner in enterprise decision-making rather than a gatekeeper that only says no. Informed trade-offs require information that is good enough to support decisions, and that is different from information that is perfect. Beginners sometimes assume you must measure every risk precisely before you can act, but governance operates under uncertainty, so the goal is to reduce uncertainty to a decision-ready level. That often means having a clear description of the threat or failure mode, a reasonable estimate of impact, and an understanding of likelihood drivers, such as exposure level and control strength. It also means being able to compare options, such as whether to reduce exposure by changing a process, improving a control, redesigning a service, or accepting a residual risk because the cost of reduction is too high. The decision becomes informed when the enterprise can explain why it chose one option over another using objectives and evidence rather than gut feeling. This is also where consistent terminology matters, because shared language reduces confusion and helps stakeholders see the same risk in the same way. Another essential part of optimization is recognizing that controls have costs and side effects, even when they are well-intended. A control can reduce exposure, but it might also slow work, increase complexity, or create user frustration that leads to shadow behavior and bypasses. When controls are designed without considering how people actually work, they can produce the opposite of the intended outcome, such as encouraging insecure shortcuts. Risk optimization therefore treats controls as design choices that must fit the environment, not as universal requirements that must be stacked endlessly. This is why governance often prefers a small number of strong, well-integrated controls over a large number of weak, inconsistent ones. Strong controls are more likely to be used correctly and maintained over time, which matters because an in-use control is only a comforting story. Optimization also includes periodically reevaluating whether a control still provides value relative to its cost, because environments change and yesterday's best answer can become tomorrow's unnecessary burden. For risk optimization to be more than a slogan, leadership must define boundaries for acceptable trade-offs, and those boundaries show up in concepts like risk appetite and tolerance. Even if you do not use formal terms every day, the idea is that leaders decide how much uncertainty the enterprise will accept in pursuit of objectives. A high-growth environment might accept more uncertainty around rapid change while still demanding tight control over customer data. A highly regulated environment might accept slower delivery to maintain stronger evidence and oversight. These decisions are not made once and forgotten, because appetite can shift when markets change, when incidents occur, or when the enterprise enters new lines of business. Governance ensures those shifts are explicit rather than accidental, and it ensures that IT and business teams can align their decisions to the same boundaries. Without clear boundaries, teams will guess, and guessing usually leads to either excessive caution or excessive risk-taking, depending on local culture and incentives. Optimization also depends on choosing the right decision level for the question at hand, because not every risk choice should be escalated to the same leadership layer. Some trade-offs are routine and can be handled by service owners within pre-approved boundaries, such as choosing how to address a known reliability issue within an approved budget. Other trade-offs are enterprise level, such as entering a new market that changes the threat landscape or adopting a platform that becomes a foundational dependency for many services. Governance provides decision rights so that routine decisions can be made quickly while high-impact decisions receive appropriate scrutiny. This reduces friction because teams are not stuck waiting for approvals on every small adjustment, and leaders are not overwhelmed by operational noise. When decision rights are clear, accountability becomes clearer as well, because it is obvious who owned the choice and what boundaries guided it. That clarity makes post-incident learning more constructive, because the enterprise can improve the system rather than just blaming individuals. A common beginner misunderstanding is to treat the goal as minimizing risk, as if a lower risk score is always better, but optimization cares about value delivered relative to risk accepted. Sometimes the correct governance decision is to accept a risk because reducing it would cost more than the benefit gained, or because the reduction would block a strategic objective. That does not mean being reckless. It means being deliberate, documenting the reasoning, and ensuring compensating measures exist where appropriate. In other cases, the correct decision is to invest heavily in reduction because the potential impact is unacceptable, such as risks that could shut down operations or create severe legal consequences. Optimization also recognizes that risk can be shifted, not only reduced, such as shifting risk through contracts, insurance, architectural choices, or operational controls, though shifting must be managed carefully because it can create new dependencies. The core governance question stays the same. Does the chosen approach create a better balance between enterprise outcomes and the uncertainty the enterprise is willing to carry? Because this is governance, it helps to connect risk optimization to enterprise risk management, (ERM), which is the enterprise-wide way of organizing risk decisions so they are consistent across domains. ERM exists because the enterprise does not experience risk in isolated silos. It experiences combined effects across operations, finance, compliance, and reputation. When risk optimization is aligned to ERM, technology-related risks can be discussed alongside other risks using shared categories and comparable impact language. That alignment helps leaders prioritize because they can see whether an IT risk is the top concern or whether other risks deserve more immediate attention. It also reduces the chance that IT teams over-optimize for technical risk at the expense of business performance, or that business teams underappreciate technical risk because it is not expressed in familiar terms. The goal is a single coherent risk conversation where trade-offs are visible and decisions can be defended as rational. To make this real, consider a simple scenario where an organization wants to launch a new digital service quickly to meet customer demand. An avoidance mindset might say delay the launch until every possible risk is eliminated, which could mean missing the market window and losing customers. A reckless mindset might say launch immediately with minimal controls, which could lead to incidents that damage trust and create costly rework. An optimization mindset would ask which risks are most relevant to the objective, which controls provide the highest reduction per unit of effort, and what residual risk is acceptable for the planned timeline. It would also plan how to monitor the service after launch, how to respond if indicators show rising exposure, and how to improve controls and stages as the service stabilizes. This creates a deliberate path that balances speed and trust, which is often what the enterprise truly needs. The point is not that the decision becomes easy, but that the decision becomes explainable and evidence-based. As we conclude, defining risk optimization as informed trade-offs means replacing the idea of risk avoidance with a governance habit of deliberate choice. Risk cannot be removed from meaningful enterprise activity, but it can be understood, shaped, and managed so the enterprise can pursue outcomes while staying within boundaries leadership accepts. Optimization requires clear objectives, shared language, decision-ready information, and an honest view of control costs and side effects. It also depends on clear decision rights, ongoing measurement, and alignment between IT choices and enterprise risk conversations such as ERM. When you learn to talk about risk as a balance between value and uncertainty, You stop treating governance as a barrier and start seeing it as a steering system. That steering system is what allows an enterprise to move forward confidently, not because nothing can go wrong, but because leaders understand what could go wrong, what they are doing about it, and why the trade-offs make sense.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.